Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. How are you? Have a good night, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, now we will come to today's news. Do you think the Chinese are going to have to force the price of gold higher? The end? Okay. So here's the thing. I don't know that there's going to be surety for that, Greg. Because they could collapse before they could get there. Oh, in which case, it would not happen that way. Right? That's if they were to try and continue. If they're able to hold it together, they must do something to stabilize their currency in a period like 2.5 to 3, maybe 4 months from now. It'll be that shaky, that bad. But they could collapse as a going concern that rapidly. So here let me illustrate this with an understanding of the Chinese and things that go on there. The Chinese have had empires for a long time, and a very famous empire of theirs was this Middle Kingdom Empire, which we would think of as like maybe being a third of China. Right? It is not as big as China as we know it today, but anyway. So there was this emperor. He, and his young son was in a position of being made the nominal emperor, but he had a regent and he was controlled for. He was in a very dangerous situation. There was a lot of money at stake. You know, the whole empire and everything. His name was King Nguyen, and he devised a plan to save his life and to save his kingdom. This plan required for him to be duplicitous and live a false life for 18 years, because for 18 years he pretended to grow up as a schizophrenic, and so throughout he pretended to have early onset schizophrenia. And throughout all of his teens, in his early 20s and into his period when he was 30, he pretended to be an absolute raving schizophrenic at the control of this cabal that was running his regime, very much like we have now with JB. Right? Only in this case, we don't think JB's pretending. But King Nguyen was an interesting guy because he took 18 years to develop a backing in the populace around him, in spite of the fact that many of these people thought he was actually as crazy as he pretended to be. He developed a support system that allowed him to take over and seize his kingdom all basically in a single night, because he'd planned that long, that sort of thing. So, it's the same go ahead as the same kind of thing happening now. Do we have a win regime? We have sort of the same kind of thing now, where things are not as they seem, and that there has been a long effort planning such that this should be that way, that things should are not as they seem now. Our system is, or what we're facing is not parallel to King Wen, but we have a presiding person in. That's what the root word of president is, right? Is you are presiding at the meeting, and this is where it comes from, the Council of the Iroquois. In any event, though, so we have a situation where our presiding person has withdrawn, very much like crazy King Nguyen had to withdraw and was not seen and didn't do things in the surface in order that other things might be seen in and might be brought out to the point where people reacted with it. King Nguyen had an interesting situation where there were racial subgroups, and they were being ruled by a racial subgroup that was in this cabal, and he just allowed them to be seen by the people that they were living among, and they didn't have a sufficiently large population. And when it came time for that revolution, it was just like literally overnight. They just went and arrested everybody, and basically they them all, and he was King Wen and wasn't crazy the next day, and things started changing very rapidly. And actually, he went on to conquer a neighboring province that had been the source of all of this and put it all right. And it leads us up into the Yellow Emperor's periods of time. But we're in this situation where the Chinese have got themselves into a really scary point for the finances, for the people, for the wars, all of this. The Chinese, for instance, if you read the manual Unrestricted Warfare that was written in the 90s by this planning colonel for the CCP, they acknowledge that they cannot win a war with the United States, and it's stupid to go to a kinetic war with us, and so they were fighting us. War by other means. But the war by other means depends on deception and being hidden. And now, we're coming into this point where none of it can be hidden anymore, and it's all coming out, and as long as it just keeps grinding out, it will grind down. The CCP, the globalists, and all of this. The CCP are just an extension of our globalist enemy, who, as I said decades ago, were saying that the World War IV is going to be them versus the populace, and we're here. Now, do you think there might be arrests soon? Do you think it might be arrested? Do you think there might be arrest in the United States with this? Well, it will happen because of the situation that we have in our social order. So we have a rule of law, and everybody behaves as though a law can be personified, and we all behave with it, and we do legal things, but at some point those who are in the justice system, who are the authority, they abuse their authority, and it's just like with the Declaration of Independence, which I've got a copy of here. And when in the course of a long chain of assertions of authority and abuse of the populace, it becomes necessary that the people take unto themselves the reformation of their government, and we are here now, and so our republic had been captured over the course of its previous 200+ years repeatedly, and we've thrown them out repeatedly. Andrew Jackson, for instance. He had an illegal presidency issue and we reformed it, and so on. So this is nothing new, and we're just here again, and we're doing it again, only this time in this sense. There are new elements that it is global. It's not just the United States, and so what we're going to be doing here will be echoed in a lot of other countries, and there will be chaos around the whole planet, very much as we had in the beginning of the 1900s up through 1945, but we're gonna come through it in spite of all the problems, and we're just gonna have to rebuild, but we won't be rebuilding what we used to have. Okay. Because so much of that was put on us. All of the financial systems and stuff are not organic. They were not part of our economy. We don't need a financial system. There's the idea of these people in the conspiracy world that we're going to replace one financial system with another is absurd, because what we need is an economic interactions between ourselves and to have an economy. But why should we have a regulated system? Why should there be anything? System implies central control? We don't want, right? And so if you've got silver in your hand, you're free. You don't have anybody owning you through debt. This is what the powers that be hate. This is what the CCP can't have. None of these guys can live with that, and when that breaks free, it breaks their system at such a core level that mentally, it will shock. So many people, you're a nice young man, but you were still alive back in the days of the Hunt brothers. Oh, yeah. And that's still in that silver fiasco 1980. It is difficult for us to try and describe to these kids what it was like in the towns across the United States, in the world at that point, with people lining up during those days to get either oil or gas for their cars or buy gold or silver. I remember in Little Podunk town that I was in at that time, 100 people lining up at a local coin store before it opened up on a Monday morning to go on in and hopefully buy some silver, and they were willing at that point to pay $100 an ounce. Yeah. That's back then. And two things. I want to get to two things real quick. One of the things is that you said in the pre-interview, says, I don't know if Social Security will last to the end of the year. That's correct. I don't know that they'll be paying out. Wow. It's going to be there. It'll happen suddenly because it's the digital dollars. The digital dollars will crash suddenly because it is a system. And when systems go, they don't really crumble. They just sort of break and get turned off. And so, I'm uncertain as to how long it will continue. Effectively, the government is broke. I've known all my life. So, security wouldn't be around for me, and it just on the progression of the debt level and the purchasing power. So we're here now. I'm seeing 1200 hyperinflation in parts. How much rapidly or how much further behind can it be that the Social Security check wouldn't buy anything, and you'd be a buyer of gold and silver right now? You slip into your local coin store. I had a friend of mine call me, says, great man, I went to a coin store yesterday afternoon. I said, yes. He says, nobody there. I said, you got silver? Sure. What do you want? Okay. It's like, hey, where is he? He says, unbelievable. So you'd be a buyer of silver and gold? Silver. Particularly, you'd be a buyer because it's cheap. Yeah. They're basically paying you. They're basically paying you to buy silver because if we were to look at John Williams' shadow stats, we're looking at a bare minimum of hitting my 600 an ounce. It should be adjusted for inflation over the 1980 price. Silver should be about 600 an ounce, and obviously it is not. Obviously, that if you go into a store and you wanted to buy an ounce of silver, you'd be paying in the 20 range, right? Yeah. Maybe 30 depending on the nature of the coin or something. Right, and so obviously, they're subsidizing that by the tune of $540 or $570 because that's what we should be it in its real value relative to currencies, and so in that sense the powers that be in attempting to suppress the silver are creating the point at which they're creating the hill that they will on by pushing that price down, because it means more of us can buy it, which they don't want, but they can't have that price rise because it destroys the thing that they do want, which is for us to take their dollars. If silver were to be very much more expensive, the dollar is that much more less valuable. It seems to me sometimes that you've gone through this, but I just want a quick ending to this would be that it looks like with this arrest of this the FBI arrest retired Green Beret. Which you say is desperation. Who's winning? Is the deep state winning, or are we the people winning? We the people are winning. The deep state was always going to lose. They only exist through deception, and we win through words and in the hearts and minds. We don't have to have bullets in any of that. It's a weird kind of a war. World War IV is good that way. Even though there are people that are the deep state is losing every single one of their actions are desperation, and they're fighting. Now, they're rapidly breaking down into the individual groups and then individuals fighting to save their lives. And it's in that sense, it's good for us that we're winning, but it's that gotta slog through at time of the war. Yeah. The evil's turning on it. The evil is gonna turn on each other and said, no, no, no. They did that, no, no. I didn't do this, no. They don't know that's happening already. We know that's happening at some of the levels of the audits, that there's people that are just getting out that violin because they're going to sing. That's the interesting part. So because we could follow those kind of things and those decisions up and find out where the real evil is, and I hope that we don't destroy our ability to do that in the process of cleaning this out. It's so we're at this point where the normies are gonna wake up. But what are they going to wake up to? Okay. Are they going to wake up to Biden cheated, or they're going to wake up to Biden, the traitor at the request of the CCP, assisted the CCP in cheating, or they're going to wake up to Biden? The globalists working with the CCP stooges worked for the globalists on behalf of a global collective to cheat. So there's just so many layers. See that it'll just take a long time for everyone to come to some understanding of just, and basically, I think that they'll get to a point where they say, okay, that's good enough. I don't need to know any more big fireworks before the end of the year. Big fireworks in October and November. Red October. It's Red October, and it's going to be dark November. And December very black. Alright. Hopefully you folks enjoyed this chat this morning. Thank you very much.